There's one reason saving money feels impossible for so many people, and it has nothing to do with income, discipline, or motivation. It's something almost nobody talks about. And once you see it, you're going to understand why every savings plan you've ever tried has quietly fallen apart, no matter how motivated you felt on day one. Before I explain it, I want to say something that might sound strange coming from a finance channel. I don't think most people have a discipline problem. I think most people have been given the wrong instructions and then blamed themselves when those instructions didn't work. That's not fair to you, and it's not accurate either. Here's what almost every piece of savings advice tells you to do. Look at your income, look at your expenses, and whatever is left over, save it. It sounds logical. It sounds responsible. And it almost never works, for one simple reason. Leftover money doesn't exist. There's no such thing as money that's just sitting around waiting to be saved. Money expands to fill whatever space it's given. If you have extra room in your budget this month, something will show up to fill it. Whether that's a bigger grocery bill, a spontaneous purchase, or just slightly more relaxed spending because you feel like you have breathing room. This is the part nobody tells you. Saving whatever is left over isn't a strategy. It's a hope. And hope is not a plan your bank account can rely on. I learned this the hard way. For years, I told myself I was going to save more once things settled down. Once I got a raise. Once a big expense was paid off. Once life felt a little less chaotic. And every single time, right when things were about to settle, something new would show up that needed that exact amount of money. It wasn't bad luck. It was the natural result of never actually protecting the money in the first place. If saving only happens after everything else has already had its turn, saving will always lose, because everything else always shows up first. So what actually fixes this? The shift that changed everything for me wasn't a better budget, a stricter mindset, or more willpower. It was moving savings from last place to first place. Instead of saving what's left over after spending, you spend what's left over after saving. That single reversal is almost the entire solution. And I want to slow down here, because it sounds simple, but the implications are huge. When saving happens first, it stops depending on your motivation, your memory, or your mood on any given day. You don't have to remember to save, or feel like saving, or have enough leftover willpower at the end of a long month to transfer money you were tempted to spend 3 times already. The decision gets made once, automatically, the moment money arrives, and everything else in your life simply adjusts around what's left. Think about how a paycheck actually works if you have taxes taken out. Nobody negotiates with their tax withholding every single month. Nobody sits down and decides, do I feel like paying taxes this time? It just happens automatically before the money ever really feels like it was yours to spend. Savings can work exactly the same way. If it happens automatically and immediately, it stops being a decision you have to keep making and starts being a structure you simply live inside of. Now, I know the objection that's probably forming in your head right now. That sounds great, but I genuinely don't have room to save first. My expenses already use up everything I earn, and I want to take that seriously, because for some people, that's a real structural problem that no mindset shift is going to fix. If your expenses truly exceed your income, the answer isn't a savings trick. It's addressing income or expenses directly, and that's a completely different conversation. But here's what I've noticed, both in my own life and in talking to other people about this. For most people, the feeling of there's nothing left to save isn't actually true. It's a feeling created by the order things happen in. When spending comes first, spending will always expand to use up everything available, because there's no boundary stopping it. It's not that the money doesn't exist. It's that the money never had a chance to be protected before spending got to it first. Here's how to actually put this into practice, starting with the smallest possible version, because I don't want you to overhaul your entire financial life overnight. Pick one single amount, even a small one, and set it up to move automatically the moment your income arrives, before you do anything else with that money. It doesn't need to be a large percentage. It needs to be first. If your bank allows automatic transfers on payday, use that. If it doesn't, do it manually, but do it immediately, not later today or this weekend. The moment money arrives is the only moment this actually works, because that's the one point in time before spending has had any chance to claim it. Once that first automatic transfer is in place, don't touch it for at least one full pay cycle. Let yourself live on what remains, even if it feels a little tighter than usual. This is important. Some tightness at the start is normal, and it doesn't mean the system is broken. It means your spending is adjusting to a new boundary, the same way it always adjusts to whatever boundary exists. The goal isn't to feel comfortable immediately. The goal is to prove to yourself that life continues and adjusts, even when saving comes first. After that first cycle, look honestly at what happened. Did you genuinely struggle to cover essentials? That's useful information, and it might mean the amount needs to be smaller for now, not that the whole approach is wrong. Or did you simply feel a little more careful with spending without anything actually breaking? For most people, it's the second one. And that tells you the amount you set aside wasn't a barrier. It was just protected. Let me give you a real example of how this played out for me, because I think it makes the whole idea click in a way theory doesn't. Before I made this shift, I was earning a reasonably decent income, and on paper, saving a few $100s a month should have been easy. But every month played out the same way. Rent, groceries, a few unavoidable bills, and then a series of smaller things. A dinner out because I'd had a hard week, a purchase I told myself I deserved, a subscription I forgot I had. By the time I got to the end of the month and asked myself what was left to save, the honest answer was almost always the same. Not much, sometimes nothing at all. And I genuinely couldn't point to a single decision that felt irresponsible. Nothing I bought felt like a mistake in the moment. It was just death by 1,000 small, reasonable-feeling purchases, each one perfectly justifiable on its own. The month I switched the order, something immediately different happened. I set up an automatic transfer for the same day my paycheck landed, before I had even opened my banking app to look at the balance. The amount wasn't huge. It didn't need to be. What mattered is that by the time I actually sat down to think about spending, that money was already gone from the number I was mentally working with. I wasn't resisting the temptation to spend it, because in a very real sense, I never saw it as available in the first place. My brain adjusted to the smaller number the same way it had always adjusted to whatever number was in front of it. That's the part that surprised me most. I didn't feel deprived. I felt like my life looked almost exactly the same, except now there was money accumulating in the background that had simply never been available to spend. I want to be honest that this isn't magic, and it's not instant. The first month felt slightly tighter, mostly because of the discomfort of a new number rather than any actual hardship. But by the second and third month, that adjustment had already happened, the same way it always does when a boundary becomes normal instead of new. And here's the thing worth sitting with. If I had kept trying to save whatever's left, I would have spent years circling the same frustrating cycle, wondering why discipline never seemed to stick. The problem was never that I lacked willpower in the moment. The problem was that I kept placing the decision in the one spot in my financial life where willpower is weakest, at the very end, after everything else had already had its turn. There's a deeper reason this works better than relying on discipline, and it comes down to how much mental energy discipline actually requires. Every time you have to consciously decide not to spend money, you're spending willpower. And willpower is a limited resource that gets weaker throughout the day, especially when you're tired, stressed, or emotionally drained. That's exactly when most impulse spending happens. Not because you're weak, but because your brain's capacity to resist in the moment temptation has already been used up by everything else in your day. Automating savings removes the decision from those vulnerable moments entirely. The choice was already made earlier, when your mind was calm and clear, not at 10 at night when you're scrolling and tired and looking for a small reward. I also want to address something that comes up almost every time I talk about this. The fear of setting up an automatic transfer and then having it cause an overdraft because a bill happened to hit at the wrong time. That fear is valid, and it's exactly why I said earlier not to start with a large amount. Start small enough that even in an unpredictable week, the transfer isn't going to cause real damage. You can always increase it later, once you have a clearer sense of your rhythm. The goal here isn't to design a perfect system on the first try. It's to prove the concept with something small enough that it can't really hurt you, and then build from there once you trust it. Another thing worth mentioning, this approach works because it removes negotiation, not because it removes flexibility. You can absolutely revisit the amount every few months as your income or expenses change. What you shouldn't do is treat the order itself as optional, going back to saving whatever's left the moment things get busy or stressful, because that's precisely when the old pattern is most tempting to fall back into. The order is the whole point. Everything else can flex around it. This is really the core idea behind fixing something that feels impossible. It was never about becoming a more disciplined person. It was about designing a system that doesn't require constant discipline to begin with. The people who seem naturally good at saving money usually aren't relying on willpower any more than you are. They've just built a structure where saving happens before spending gets a vote, so there's nothing left to resist in the moment. I know this video has been more about mindset and structure than a strict step-by-step checklist, and that's intentional. Most people watching this haven't failed at saving because they didn't know the mechanics of opening a savings account or setting up a transfer. They failed because they were following a system that was quietly designed to fail, no matter how much effort or discipline they brought to it. Once the order changes, the mechanics become almost irrelevant because the hardest part, the part that used to depend entirely on willpower, has already been handled before you even have to think about it. If saving has always felt impossible for you, I don't want you to walk away from this thinking you need to try harder. I want you to walk away thinking you need to change the order. Pick one amount, however small. Set it to move automatically, first, before anything else touches that money. And then, let everything else in your life simply adjust around it, the same way it always adjusts around whatever comes first. If this helped you, follow along for more content like this. No judgment here, just learning together, one small step at a time.